Do you have any, you know, words of advice for someone who may be looking to pursue a degree in exercise science or physiology that isn't quite sure, or they gotten their bachelor's, but they're not sure about their master's? You know, it's a pretty intense field, but there's a lot you can do with it. So what do you have for those people?
Well, you sound like the thing I talked to all my undergraduates. We have at Ohio State, Connecticut, Penn State, we used to have what I called boot camps. I was in the U.S. Army, and I know about boot camps. So, and I do a lot of military research. I've actually wish I would have mentioned a ton of names that I haven't mentioned, because there's so many great people out there, and so proud of the many women that have actually gotten their PhDs with me and really pushing the envelope on all different fronts too. But I guess it's Dr. Phil Galnick was a famous muscle physiologist in the 1970s and 80s, and died really a unfortunate premature death due to a valve malfunction, I think a pacemaker misfunction, if I'm right, too early in his career. And he trained one of my friends I worked with, Dr. Gary Klug at La Crosse, at the University of Wisconsin, La Crosse. And basically I met him early on, and he told me, he said, you know, if you want to be a good exercise physiologist, first of all, you better be a darn good physiologist and biochemist. So he got right to the heart of the matter. You can't take a bunch of paper courses. You can't take a bunch of pseudoscience. You can't take a bunch of things. So you got to take the hardcore physiology, biochemistry courses and be competent in what you know about physiology and biochemistry. And then you may think about that you want to use that to your area of exercise that you want to study. So I think a lot of times, I think people see the graphs that I put up, you know, on a presentation, and they don't realize the amount of tedious work that goes into it. So I tell the students, I said, you know, science done right, because there's a lot of individuals out there that haven't had that type of background. You know, publishing a paper is not difficult if you know, it depends upon the intensity of the studies that you want to be doing, you know, and, you know, we've done them all at all levels. I'm not saying that, but you got to know, for example, if you're going to be in exercise physiology, you got to be good as a physiologist first. So if I say, okay, what's the role of baroreceptors during a weight training program? Well, if you don't know your physiology, you don't know what baroreceptors are. You don't know how it controls different physiological functions. So you have to be a good physiologist. So all the students that I've had in the programs that made it through the programs have all had their hand put on the fire, you know. I always made that old analogy to the Kung Fu movies of the 1970s where he's gripping the thing to get his tattoos on his arms with the cauldron, scalding cauldron. And I had to laugh a little bit. And it's hard. It's hard work. And they're all individuals. That's the other thing, too. When I train doctoral fellows, we train them as physiologists. We train them with the mass importance of that. And then exercise physiology. But you don't make clones. They're all individual minds and scientists that are going to take on their own area and go and make a contribution to knowledge, human knowledge. So the first thing you got to do in exercise physiology is really make sure you have the background in science and then get exposure to research. And that's where a master's degree with a research project, with a thesis is so important, so that you have research exposure, because you need to start studying under that. And then I tell them, you got to find a good mentor. You know, you don't study with a university, you study with an individual. And that individual is the one who's going to be like an apprentice. If you be an apprentice, take an apprenticeship in plumbing, you find the best plumber you can. That's why a lot of the kids are going into the military, will take welding or different areas where they know they're getting all the certificates and training by good mentors, so that they come out and really are competent at that level with what they know. So you have to get a good mentor in the program as well. and you got to find it. And in exercise physiology, there's lots of great mentors out there. In resistance exercise physiology, it's a little bit dicier because, you got to find somebody that really knows resistance training and also is a physiologist and exercise physiologist. So that's a challenge right now to the field. But I think then after that, you tell people you got to understand what your goals are as well. You got to be able to, number one, understand what level that you're training somebody for. As a mentor that I did, I trained all my students to be Division I research scientists, to function, whether it be at Ohio State, whether it be at UCLA, whether it be at MIT, I don't care, Division I. And that meant that you got to also understand that you're going to have to write grants. And I didn't understand that when I was going to school. I was so interested in knowledge and everything else. And then, I had to learn the hard way that, hey, you're in D1 schools. That I learned that at Penn State, and it continued on all the years post. If you have to be able to do grant writing, you got to fund your program. You got to pay for all these people. You're running a small business. And that's something you got to understand, that you need that background. And to get there, you have to know how to write. And if you don't know how to write, you can't publish, you can't write grants, you can't be successful. And not everybody wants to go to the Division I grant writing, big money schools to do that as a job. I never had planned to do that. I really was going to go back to University of Wisconsin lacrosse. I wanted to coach football, do some weight training research, and teach. And then all of a sudden, I was in the United States Army, and all of a sudden I spun off, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm with my good friend and one who really made my career, Dr. Carl Marish. I knew him from way back in my undergraduate days when he was a master's level research assistant at University of Wisconsin lacrosse, and he's really responsible for my career, and along with Bruce Noble, who took a chance on me when I said I want to be an expert in resistance training. And I was at University of Pittsburgh visiting with Dr. Carl Marish at the time, and he said, hey, well, if you want to do that, you got some work to do. When other people thought I was nuts when I told them I want to be a worldwide expert in resistance training. And he said, well, you got some work to do then. So the bottom line is that I think you got to find a mentor. You got to learn how to write. You got to have good, solid science, and you got to understand how accurate and rigorous research should be. There's a lot of research done in the field today that's not rigorous, not done well. And that's why we have issues with regard to really evaluating publications and what they are and what they mean and everything else, because not everybody holds their self to the same high standards from data collection to analyses to a lot of different aspects. So it's a challenge in the field, but I think if people are dedicated and realize it takes a lot of hard work, if it's a lot of tedium associated with it, a lot of long hours, to be able to make you the academic athlete you need to be to compete in the field at the level that you want to compete at. So pick it wisely, do well, and I think people can be successful, as I've seen happen so many places beyond my lab, other labs around the country, from Dr. Fry, Dr. Hausch. There's so many great laboratories out there working with you and seeing all that you're learning and what you do. I mean, it's exciting for the next generation to pass the baton on.